Hey everyone, welcome to Princess of Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are here with my blind reaction to The Fly. This is a donation reward for Sweet Venom, and yeah, I'm pretty interested in this. But first off, before anything, you may notice you can see the ring light here and everything. We had our living room differently situated for the holidays, and everything's been moved back. So where I would normally have the webcam to record out here, the couch is now in the way. So this is pretty much the angle I have to have this at. And it's like I could, I guess, move the webcam or the ring light over a little bit, but it's not really that big of a deal. Um, at least not. It's not too big of a deal to where it's distracting or like too terrible. I don't know, I guess. You can also see my drum back here. My Tycho drum I got for Christmas. Um, but yeah, it's just I'm not gonna like I didn't change like the scenes and everything on OBS, so it's like this is just how it's like set up basically. Um, Based on where I can put my webcam. The only other option would basically be to have the webcam hang off the top of my computer, which wouldn't be like a terrible plan, but it's just I don't really feel like it's necessary. I don't feel like I need to take it off of the tripod at all. We're just gonna stick with it like this. So I apologize, and I apologize that this pillow back here looks like a penis right now. Like, look at this. It is weirdly phallic. Like, this part here even looks like balls. Like, what the fuck? I'm fixing that. There we go. That was really weirdly phallic. And speaking of really weird, let's actually talk about this. So, The Fly, with starring Jeff Goldblum and everything. This is unlike some movies I react to. I do know a little bit about this. At least I've seen like a single clip, I think, but I've seen it like a few times throughout my life, and I know the general plot. I know it's about a scientist who has an experiment gone wrong that turns him into a human fly hybrid. But like it's a gradual process. It's not like an instantaneous thing. I don't know like any other big details, like whether or not he's able to be turned back or whatever else. But yeah, it's pretty interesting of an idea nonetheless. And apparently, when I was getting this movie, when I was getting this for the reaction, um, I found out that apparently this is a remake. That there was like a '50s movie. Um, I don't know the details about it, but yeah, apparently there was. This is a remake of an older film that I didn't know. So that in it of itself is also pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, so I don't really know what else to expect from this because I don't know who else is in it or whatnot. Um, but I've seen older stuff with Jeff Goldblum in it, so I know the kind of stuff he acted in and how weird he could be from that time. Um, but still, I'm just kind of hoping to just enjoy this. To just see this as like this kind of fun sci-fi romp with a little bit of horror elements in it. That's kind of what I'm expecting from this. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. And this is the other movie I mentioned in the Darkman reaction, by the way. As for the film that like had the same runtime, and I was deciding between the two, so I just decided to do this one next. Um, So yeah, it's about the same runtime as Darkman, so that's interesting in and of itself. I don't know pacing wise or whatnot, like what the differences are going to be in terms of other movies from this time. I guess we'll just have to find out. And I don't know like how quickly it's going to get to like the gross shit. Because again, I've seen a clip and it's like it's some like gross body horror kind of stuff. I don't remember the exact specifications of what happened because it, even though I've seen it multiple times throughout my life, it's been a while since the last time I saw it. But yeah, so that's the gist of my knowledge about this and my kind of hopes going in, I guess you could say. Um, but I guess we should just get into this and see what we have in store. Um, so, when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black, then it fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the movie. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So, this had a very tragic, dark, and honestly sad ending. There was no way to reverse the process, nothing that could really be done. And after that final transportation went awry, it needed to be ended. And yeah, Jesus. Um, this movie is interesting because there's a lot to praise. A lot. But only once it starts getting going. And what I mean is the early portion of the film is not great. The acting is so fucking awkward, and not because they're intentionally supposed to be awkward people. Both Gina Davis and and Jeff Goldblum just don't seem to be giving it their all at the beginning of this film. Um, and yes, Goldblum's character, Seth, is supposed to be a shy, awkward type of guy, but Jeff Goldblum has performed that type of character much better. Here, he just seemed like he was not sure of what he was doing. He didn't seem like he was like invested in, performing the character. Maybe it was just because he was having to act like so timid and everything and so quiet and shy that it came across as weird, but it really did. Once things started getting going and he was, starting to gain the aggression and the confidence and everything, and starting to become Brundlefly, he became exceptionally better. Gina Davis became exceptionally better once she started working off of that. At the beginning, she was just very awkward. Again, I can't think of a better way to put it. She just didn't. It didn't feel natural. Any of her delivery or any of her responses to anything, and so it felt a little off. Not to mention the pacing early on. It rushes into things a bit. I feel like if this movie were a little longer, like 10 to 15 minutes longer, um, they could have paced out the beginning a little better, and especially um, their relationship, because it was rushed into. It really was. Like they became a couple way too quickly, and I get that most of the film is meant to be during the slow, continuous transformation and how he's losing his humanity and becoming more of the Fly. And I get that. But at the same time, it's like you want the beginning to set it up well to keep your investment. If I were watching this on my own, I probably would have stopped watching. It's like the beginning was that kind of just awkward and boring. Once it really got started, it really got started. Don't get me wrong. And at that point, it really became something great. But the beginning was just I think the only part of the beginning that was slightly interesting to me was when he was actually doing the experiments, when he was actually, like transporting stuff, like the baboon or the steaks. Those parts, like, yeah, I could get into that a little more, because that was a little more interesting. It was a little more unique, and it stood out compared to everything else. But when they're just like interacting and stuff, talking to each other and whatnot, a lot of it felt very awkward. But like I said, once it does start getting going, it becomes great. Not just good, but great. It becomes something like I can see why this film is so well received. I can see why this film is as kind of legendary as it is. Like, when you think of monster movies, you think of like the classics. You think of Bela Lugosi's Dracula. You think of the classic Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, that kind of stuff. But like, while more recent, I mean, the mid '80s aren't exactly recent, of course, but more recent than the old classic black and white horror films from Universal and whatnot. It's like this could almost kind of be considered a classic monster movie in its own right. Kind of has all the makings. It has this. It kind of feels almost like it's an homage to them, in just the way it's once it starts getting going, the way it's written and presented, and even kind of the tragedy of it felt very classic monster movie to me. We see a scientist who is a good guy and just wants to genuinely make something that'll change the world, but an accident causes him to become a monster, and progressively he becomes worse and worse, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. He becomes more aggressive and abusive and just dangerous. And some of the things made very little sense to me, obviously, but it was still entertaining. Like, why would he gain superhuman, like, strength and shit, and agility and all that? It's like that doesn't really entirely equate for a fly. I don't really understand that, but whatevs. It's still entertaining. Um, and it's also kind of interesting, the kind of role reversal we had. Because Seth starts the film as the good guy, as the protagonist and everything, the guy we're supposed to root for. And then at the end, he becomes the villain, the monster, the one who needs to be stopped. Even though he's not really in full control of himself anymore because of this transformation. He even understood at the end that he needed to be put down, that this needed to end. And on the other hand, we have Stathis, I think his name was, um, Gina Davis's character's Ronnie's editor. He started off as kind of this scummy, sleazy, greasy slime ball. This just absolutely gross, fucking disgusting piece of shit. But in the end, he ended up being a hero. If it weren't for him, like, Brundlefly and Ronnie would have, and their baby, I guess, would have been fused together. They would have been spliced together. He saved the day. He did. And he was the one who was basically able to put an end to this, like, even outside of just, Ronnie shooting Brundlefly. It's like he was kind of the MVP in the end. And he started off as a terrible, shitty person, but he saved her life. And granted, like, he, even before that, started to become a little better and started to support her a lot more. And actually support her. So there was kind of this role reversal. You have the nice guy scientist who becomes the monster, and you have the monster who becomes a nicer guy. It's pretty interesting in that regard. Just the the role reversal and everything, and the how they switched kind of places. Um, Also, apparently the gynecologist in this was the director, Cronenberg. He just had a little cameo as the gynecologist. That's fun. Kind of random, but fun. I found that out. Um, and yeah, the practical effects work, like, my God, it was good. Like, this is not quite on the same level, but near it. Near the same quality as The Thing. And that's like the biggest praise you can give for practical effects, especially when it comes to horror. And this is horror. It's sci-fi horror, for sure. Maybe not in the same way as The Thing, but it still would count. And yeah, it's just, I definitely see the connection that could be made with The Thing in terms of its practical effects. I still think The Thing is better, but I mean, let's be honest, it's The Thing. It has like some of the best practical effects in cinema, period. So it's hard to match up to that, but the fact that the effects here, the practical makeups and everything were just that damn good is a real testament to the work that actually did go into making this. Um, there were some moments that were like really fucking grotesque, and like the body horror like went really hard, and for the type of movie it is, that makes sense. It works. It's what you basically want from a movie like this. So while it was very hard to watch at a couple points, I'm glad that they did it nonetheless. And again, once it started getting going, all the actors really started stepping up and becoming a lot better. And I really can't fathom why they were so weakly performing in the first bit of it, but still, the fact that they improved that much is like Jesus, because Jeff Goldblum was fantastic throughout most of this film. Once he started becoming Brundlefly, once the fusion happened, it's like it's like he flipped a switch, you know? And I really think that's a fantastic execution of that. Um, the soundtrack was good. Nothing altogether special. Like, comparing again to The Thing's soundtrack was more iconic than this. This is like, it's a fitting soundtrack. It works, but it's nothing to write home about. Um, the pacing and everything, once we get to after the splicing ends up happening, it's really great at that point. The pacing gets much better, and it's really well handled. Um, the progression that he goes through is fantastic. It's really well done. You get to see how it starts off with just like different things being like strengthened in him, and then how it starts affecting him a lot more physically and whatnot. It's really good. It's really well handled in that regard. Um, and I just think that it was great. It wasn't like, again, it wasn't perfect. Definitely not the best horror film I've seen. But for what it was, it delivered on what it needed to be. Um, I think the dream sequence with the giant grub was a little much, but I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with it. But yeah, it's a very tragic story because Seth was not a bad guy. He wanted to help people. He wanted to use his invention to, help people, to progress humanity. And it probably would have worked if not for this horrible accident. If not for that, it probably would have worked. And so it's just once he started becoming more aggressive and intense and just overall, like, mean, like, let's be honest, that's when it started to change for him, and he started to think more self-centeredly, and was worrying less about how he could help people and more about, like, how he started feeling better and becoming stronger and everything. It started becoming all about him. But as always, let's look up what others have to say about this. So the critical response, this movie was critically acclaimed. I knew that going in. With most praise going to Goldblum's performance after the transformation, at least for my opinion, and the special effect, definitely the special effects, without question. Despite being a gory remake of a classic, yeah, apparently the '50s version and all, which apparently had Vincent Price in it, which is pretty fucking interesting. um, and made by a controversial non-mainstream director. Okay, I don't know how Cronenberg is controversial. I don't know. I'm not saying like he's not or he shouldn't be. I just don't know how he is. But non-mainstream. Nowadays he's pretty well known. I mean, I've heard people talk about Cronenberg. I've heard that name a lot. Anyways, the film was a commercial success, the biggest of Cronenberg's career, and was the top grossing film in the US for 2 weeks, earning a total domestic gross of $40,456,565. Audiences reacted strongly to the graphic creature effects. Fair, I did too. And the tragic love story. Yeah, yeah. And the film received much attention at the time of its release. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A plus depth scale. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Again, it's not the best horror movie out there, but it definitely deserves to have a high enough rating. Cronenberg was surprised when The Fly was seen by some critics as a cultural metaphor for AIDS. Okay. I would not have thought about that, but okay. Since he originally intended the film to be a more general analogy for disease itself, terminal conditions like cancer, and more specifically, the aging process. Okay. So, Cronenberg wanted the movie to be an analogy for disease and cancer and aging and all of that, and how it can affect a person, their mind, their body, and everything. I can see that. And specifically, some critics thought it was like AIDS, I guess, as more of a specific metaphor. Um, I guess that could be seen. But here, I guess, is like a quote or something. If you or your lover has AIDS, you watch that film, and of course you'll see AIDS in it, but you don't have to have that experience to respond emotionally to the movie. And I think that's really its power. This is not to say that AIDS didn't have an incredible impact on everyone, and of course, after a certain point, people were seeing AIDS stories everywhere, so I don't take any offense that people see that in my movie. For me, though, there was something about the Fly story that was much more universal, aging and death, something all of us have to deal with. So yeah, he kind of like had a more general sense that could appeal to, or appeal is probably the wrong word, but that could connect to anyone. But as he said, he has no issue with people seeing AIDS in it. It's not a problem for him at all. It's just not what he necessarily intended. Film critic Gene Siskel named The Fly as the 10th best film of 1986. Okay. In 1989, Premiere and American Film magazines both conducted independent polls of American film critics, directors, and other such groups to determine the best films of the 1980s, and The Fly appeared on both lists. The Fly holds a 92% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. As always, take that with a grain of salt, based on 65 reviews, with an average rating of 8.4 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, David Cronenberg combines his trademark affinity for gore and horror with strongly developed characters, making The Fly a surprisingly affecting tragedy. I think that's fair. In 2005, Time magazine film critics Richard Corliss and Richard Schickel included The Fly in their list of the all-time 100 greatest movies. Really? That's a tall order, I would say. Time later named it one of the 25 best horror films, also a very tall order. The film was ranked number 33 on Bravo's 100 scariest movie moments. For what moments specifically? Because the scariest for me, honestly, was the jump scare through the window. That got me so freaking bad. But like in terms of like more like, I guess, physical scares or like, you know, tragic, like gross out scares, there were other things that could be on there. Similarly, the Chicago Film Critics Association named The Fly as the 32nd scariest film ever made. A lot of it isn't that scary to me, per se. Like, a lot of it's just really gross and upsetting and tragic. But scary, it's like there's only a couple parts that I would consider scary. The film as a whole, I would say probably not. In 2021, very recent, the Daily Star ranked The Fly at the top of its list of greatest short story adaptations. Okay. Praising the film for exhibiting how greater a short story can evolve and very much become its own detached, barely recognizable thing. I guess that's a compliment. It barely sounds like one, you know. And this was also received some accolades. It won an Academy Award for Best Makeup, very much deserved. Like, very much deserved. And it was nominated for Best Makeup and Hair in the BAFTA Awards as well. It was nominated for Best Dramatic Presentation in the Hugo Awards, and it was nominated in the Saturn Awards for Best Actress for Geena Davis and Best Director. But it also won 3 Saturn Awards for Best Actor for Jeff Goldblum, Best Makeup, very deserved again, Chris Wallace, and just generally Best Horror Film. And I actually want to see here, what else has Chris Wallace done? He's best known for his work on The Fly. Also, he's apparently a director and producer and screenwriter and all, too. Okay. I want to see what else he's done. Okay, anything I know here. Arachnophobia. I know that one. Creature Effects Supervisor. Okay. That's a wild film. It is horror comedy, but still. Okay, apparently he also worked on the sequel, The Fly 2. Okay. Oh! Wait, hold on here. Hold on, let me check something here. I'm trying to check. I'm trying to make sure on something. Okay, I'm not seeing like the specifics here. Because it lists him for Gremlins, And it says he's the creator, and it says creator Gremlins. But like in the movie page for Gremlins, it's like listing others and all. So I'm wondering if like maybe he created just the visual design of them. He was a creature consultant on Return of the Jedi, model maker for E.T. He did a close up of the dragon in Dragon Slayer. Okay, so he's done quite a few things. He did special effects makeup for Scanners. Okay. And Raiders of the Lost Ark. Oh. So for Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's the one with the face melting. Did he do that? I believe that's the one with the face melting, at least. Yeah, it has to be, right? I believe so. Apparently, he also did special effects makeup for an episode of Tales from the Crypt called The Switch. So that's interesting. Okay, and so he was the director of The Fly, too. Okay. So he took over from Cronenberg. But he did work on the first one. Yes, okay, it actually says right here. Um, okay, so it says he is well known for his creation of the Gremlins. So I guess, again, assume based just on the design? Like he created the design of them and all, or maybe like the practical stuff for it too. But he was also partially responsible for creating the famous sequence in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the Nazis melt from the intense heat created by the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, so he worked on that with others, of course, too. But that's awesome. Like that's so famous. That's amazing. That's the one of the biggest practical effects, like marvels in film, I would say, is that Raiders in the Lost Ark sequence. Um, on top of obviously the stuff from things like this movie, The Fly, or um, I just mentioned it, The Thing. Obviously, those have a little more, or just as much at least, credibility. But still, I'm just saying. But yeah, so very positively received film when it came out, and ever since, and I can't help but agree. Like again, it's not perfect. There are some issues with it. There are things that could be workshopped a little bit. Um, but honestly, I think this is a really well handled movie, and I'm really happy I finally got to see it after knowing about it for practically my whole life. Um, so tell me in the comments below, though, what did you think of The Fly? Let me know, and thank you once again to Sweet Venom for donating for this. But for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.